feel comfortable with.
Yeah, okay. So my name is Richard and I'm an addict. So generally the first thing that is required of any speaker is to qualify themselves. So I noticed a retro shirt come in and the Pink Floyd The Wall, and I can go ahead and tell you that I saw that movie. I remember the album coming out, saw the movie on 3 hits of acid and did that like 4 times. 9 months later I was in rehab for the first time. So just kind of little class participation. Anybody here over 30 other than the 2 monkeys I came in with? Okay. 35? 35? Okay. All right. So welcome. So I'm going to go ahead and out on a limb here saying this is the young people's meeting. I know. Kind of strange here. So is it common for somebody around my age to come in and tell you how lucky you are to get this so young? Yes. Is that patronizing as shit?
Yes.
Okay. So I took it as really, really patronizing. Because at that time, Narcotics Anonymous didn't have a basic text, didn't have any literature. If you had a little white book at your meeting, you were lucky. And it's not because I lived out in the middle of the sticks. I lived in Chicago at the time. And Narcotics Anonymous, if you wanted to get to a meeting, you had to know somebody. Not like we had a schedule, there was no internet, none of that stuff. So, my first time that I was clean was October 11th, 1983. There may be one person who will know. I ended up watching Nancy Reagan's Chemical People Just Say No campaign in rehab. And I was like, oh, why didn't I think of that? The fact is that I was an addict then. I was able to accumulate, a few years here and there, and then somewhere in my 20s I met her, and we decided to get married, and I remember I just decided I wanted a shot at tequila. I was in school, I was doing all right, and then, one of the reasons why I know I'm an addict and why the other fellowship didn't work for me is because as soon as I did that shot of tequila, I wanted dope. Literally that fucking night. Within, 2 weeks, it was every day, and I'm sitting there going, oh man, I should really quit. This isn't good for me, and I know better. It's not like I'm coming in here, no, I'm going to keep doing it. And so we did for another 12 years. My wife and I at the time, we were living in Sacramento. We had tried to get clean. I emailed my company and said I'm addicted, and she got really resentful and said, why didn't you lie? Well, it's because I've been gone for 3 days and I can't get off the pipe, and I'm afraid to answer the phone, look out the window, any of that stuff. So why don't I get clean? I really need this, and I'm going to lose this good job. And so we tried for a little bit. I ended up giving up that other good job and got a better job where I wasn't getting drug tested anymore. And my wife had turned to me and said, you know what? We should just go back to smoking weed. It'll save our marriage. Because we managed to stay together 13 years, stoned. It seemed to make sense. And it was like, well, okay. And I can tell you that it saved my marriage for 45 minutes. For 45 minutes, all was back to being right in the world. And then the guilt and shame came, and then all of the other shitty feelings, and we'll talk about feelings here in a little bit, but those shitty feelings that made me feel like I was not important anymore. And all it cost me was my house, my kids, my sanity twice, my freedom, restraining order, a suicide attempt, a couple other suicide attempts that nobody really knew about. And I can tell you that about 9 months later, it was New Year's Eve 2004, and I took a handful of pills, and on New Year's Eve, and I woke up in my apartment where I didn't start out, face down on my floor. All of the pills were gone. Some other medication that they were feeding me, trying to fix me with psychiatry as well. All of those were gone, and it was the beginning of the month, so there was 30 days worth, and those were gone, and I woke up and nobody had knocked on my door for 48 hours, seeing if I was okay. Nobody gave a shit. In fact, my now ex-wife was pretty glad that they got, 36 hours of quiet, because I was crazy. I'd love to tell you that was the last time I got loaded. About 3 days later, my wife, separated at the time, had the dope dealer, and I was too afraid to go out of the house again. And I did probably the most regretful, remorseful, shitty thing I've ever done in my life. I called her up and I said, "You need to get me one more bag." And she started giving me like, no, I can't. I said, "I'll call CPS and tell you that you have a drug dealer in our house and you're getting loaded." And my 4 and 2-year-old kids. Now, we've since made amends and all of those things, and she knew I didn't mean it, but I knew that by saying that, I would get her to bring me dope. So when they talk about finding ways and means to get more, that was not my worst using. And what I can tell you, it was a Sunday night. It was January 4th, and it was supposed to last me a week. It was a big enough bag. Monday morning, I'm looking at the little bit that was left, and I knew it wasn't going to work anymore. No matter what I was trying to do, and on January 5th, I tried to get loaded that morning, called somebody at 3 o'clock and said, "Okay, I need help. I need to get to a meeting. I can't do this anymore." And that was the last time I got loaded. So January 5th, I got loaded. January 6th, I started my clean time, and that was 2004. So I am now in my 12th year. I will complete it in about 3 weeks and start off 13. So let me go ahead and just make sure that you get something out of the fucking literature. The reason why I'm here and I want to carry this is because, in the 5th tradition, hopefully you know what that is, but it's to carry the message to the still suffering addict. And, at the end in the basic text, this message has always rung true with me. And I can tell you, just so you know, I am an emotional person, so I will probably cry. I do that. But what is our message? The message is that any addict can stop using drugs, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. Our message is hope and the promise of freedom. When all is said and done, our primary purpose can only be to carry the message to the addict who still suffers, because that is all we have to give. So I take that to heart. It fucking means something to me today, because I know what it's like to have absolutely no hope. I know what it's like to, people talk about it. Hey, if I was still using, I'd be dead. And see, I know that there's a fate worse than that, and it's using and still being alive. So if you can relate to that, welcome home. If you can relate to knowing that there's something really fucking important that you really want to do, whether it be something of value to you or someone of value to you, and you get loaded anyway against your will, welcome home. If you're here because somebody's making you, fine. If you don't want to be here, that's okay. It's not going to hurt me. I hope you stay. I hope you want a different way of life. And so I'm not going to blow happy smoke up everybody's ass that, hey, grateful you're here at such a young age, and you're going to, most of you won't be here in a year. And it's not just your age group, it's my age group, it's Kyle's age group, we don't stick around. Because I have a disease that tells me that I have something better to do, that I've got something figured out. So if you're not familiar, if you're still new and you're still trying to figure it out, fucking stay clean first, no matter what. And I can tell you that I've made it through and stayed clean no matter what in the last 12 years. But it's a 12-step program. And when I was 17 to 23, well, I'll kind of give the steps lip service, and I got loaded. I didn't change. And even when I came in as desperate as I was, and just so you're clear, my first year of recovery sucked on ice. There's still people who have my number in their phone as batshit rich, because I was nowhere near sane. And I mean, it wasn't my biggest drug use or anything like that, but I shook for 3 months. I was afraid when I came in here because I tried this before and it didn't work. And I will tell you that I hit about 10 months and I started planning the 1 year event. And my 1 year was going to be go pick up a coin. Then down in Sacramento, I was going to go down to Oak Park. I was going to get a bag and a rig just big enough to get one hit and go to sleep. So if you can relate to that, planning that death that way, welcome home. So no, have I done this perfectly? Absolutely not. What I can tell you is that at 11 months and 1 week, through some of the psychiatric stuff that they were trying to deal with me on because of situations that I was not handling well, I basically detoxed off of a psych med you're not supposed to. And I had had a service position on a Saturday night meeting. And I called up one of the gentlest men that I've ever encountered. And I said, I can't drive. If I drive, something bad's going to happen. And I got to get the shit to the meeting. So service. So to the gal, I forgot your name, Hootfee, thank you for getting here. Dylan, thank you for, keeping us here and opening up this meeting, because service saved my life. Because if I didn't have that bucket, I would have done it alone. I would have never let him take me for some food. And then I wouldn't have had the sponsor that took me through the 12 steps. So I think it's really important today because I fought working the steps a lot. So if you're sitting here going, well, fuck it, man, what am I going to get out of it? I've got a sponsee who is fucking wicked smart. He is just all over it. And he comes around every 6 to 9 months and he's like, man, I can't do this anymore. I'm getting loaded and it just sucks. And then gets 60 days and it's like, well, I don't think I really need meetings that much. So what I finally did was, say make a commitment to finishing. Because one of the things that, and trust me, it took me 6.5 years to finish my 12 steps. Now I started at year 1, but I finally said, when I started working with this guy, that no matter what, I'm going to finish the steps with him. Because my problem in recovery is I had always been too smart and always talked myself out of why I didn't need to do that. So we kind of worked steps through a legacy way, and it took me a while to appreciate that all of the things that they were teaching me to do was out of the basic text, the step working guide, and the It Works How and Why. I actually read them. So step 1 was I needed to find out what I was powerless over. I'd been clean for a year, so it wasn't drugs anymore. And what we talked about was my feelings. So anybody who's in Olympia, or when I was in Denver, or when I was in Kentucky, or when I was in Sacramento, if I came in and my ass was falling off, the first thing that I said is, I feel afraid, I feel lonely, I feel abandoned, and I feel inadequate. Those are my 4 horsemen of feelings of, that what I go through. And when I was able to identify the difference between a feeling and then the unmanageability of my thoughts, I was able to start making some connections that, because how many times do we start, shooting the shit and going, well, I feel like you're just not treating me nice. It's like, that's not a feeling. That's a fucking thought. And what do we know about thoughts? It's part of my disease. It's the lies that I tell myself over and over and over again, that you're really a worthless piece of shit, Richard. Your value because somebody doesn't like you or love you is nil. Because I have no low self-esteem would have been a step up. And in fact, through my recovery, low self-esteem still sometimes seems like, eh. I mean, I'm going through a situation right now where my best friend called me up and said, dude, you are the worst candidate for self-loathing that I've ever met. It's like, well, you don't know what it's like going on inside my head. So if you know what it feels like to smile and hang out and, look for all of this stuff and still go home and the thoughts won't stop, welcome home. There's a way out. So now the interesting thing about understanding what my feelings are, and we're talking about the uncomfortable ones, we're not talking about, hey, I feel happy, I went to a show and these people said, yeah, we don't, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ones that where I wanted to isolate and stay at home and not come out because I felt so lousy. So I had to identify what those uncomfortable feelings were. And for 6 months, it was, I feel shitty. And then I figured out what shitty was. And then I started realizing the lies that I had been telling myself. And I finally went to my sponsor and I go, okay, great. I've done what you asked. I write these things out. I call the people and I tell, I feel statements. I feel and I think, and these are lies to myself. And I was fucking pissed. I hope they don't mind if we swear because I'm kind of loud. Okay. Because obviously I'll say fuck. And I'm pissed off at them. I'm like, what the hell? Why am I... This is not helping. I feel just as shitty now as I did, 3-4 months ago. And he says, good, you're ready. I'm like, what? He's got this fucking grin. And now my sponsees get the same grin because I won't move them to step 2 until they come up and they are fucking pissed at me. He says, now you're ready for some hope. This is where the relief kicks in. Because this first step is to realize all of the shit that's going on inside me. And now the hope of the second step kicks in. Have I come to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity? I'm not going to fucking if you get into the it works, how, and why, and how they dissect sanity, fuck it. If you're at this point and you're fucking losing your mind over why are we here, why am I here, what am I doing, and all that, fucking just trust me, work it. Give it a shot. And I had to write out, every time I was doing the process, have I come to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity? And that is, if I'm doing the process, the answer is yes. Because the process is a power greater than myself. Now, I'm not a big one for a group of addicts because I've been around long enough and you guys are fucking nuts. And there's a lot of people that I wouldn't trust in my home, near my car, near my shit, near my woman, any of that stuff. So yeah, I'm not going to necessarily take the group, but I have found people that I trust. I have found people with integrity who, when I get that, oh, this is the third person to tell me I need outside help, based on my actions and the way I'm handling this, I get outside help. If a couple of people are talking about when are you going to forgive them, I pick up a book on forgiveness and relearn how to forgive. So that's power greater than myself. It comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes, and do we get into our higher power? I can tell you that it's not me, and therefore I get an opportunity, whether you're Christian, Islam, Buddhist, Tao, atheist. If you have found a spiritual connection, I can learn from you. And that's why I like it. Because I've been able to learn what my higher power can be in a lot of different ways. So the second part of and now this process, I had to write out these questions. What do I feel? What do I think? And have I come to believe? And now it's like, well, what is my insanity? Well, the answer is always my actions. Because, we already figured out my thoughts are crazy. And they're unmanageable. And so now I've got this insanity that I've got to start writing out about. And it's like, oh, well, I texted my ex-wife 16 times yesterday. I was pissed off. And, I called her a bitch and a whore. And so now all of a sudden I got all this shit on paper going, this is insane. This is causing me misery and, change, forced misery. I mean, it's all over the basic text in the readings, that I get to have a choice on how miserable I'm going to make myself. And with that, now all of a sudden, I have this little sliver of hope. I'm starting to see on paper once, twice, 3, 4 times a day just how insane I am and just all the shit that I do that's fucked up. Well, step 3, guess what? I got to write out again, have I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God? And again, my higher power, not necessarily a guy in the sky, but, I get to answer that. And I will tell you that every time I wrote those 2 out, I got a little bit of relief. Every time I went through it, I got a little bit more relief. And then, what are my expectations? That's, if I'm fucking in God's will, I don't have expectations of you guys. I don't have expectations of things at work. I don't have expectations. So now I got to write out, I expect my ex-wife to, love me. I expect these things to happen. I expect, something to go my way. I expect to get a raise. I expect to be able to, have all of these things. And then it's like without working for them. I want them handed to me. I'm entitled. So now all of a sudden my expectations and my entitlement starts kicking in. And it's like, those are changeable. I can let those go. That's where the decision is. I mean, it was a couple weeks ago where the Just for Today was talking about, we cannot make this decision often enough. So to me, it's not, oh God, please take my will. Okay. If you're there, I'm not trying to downplay it, but for me, it doesn't work. For me, it's like, oh, wait, I'm about to really get myself fucked up in the head again. So in getting in touch with feelings, my thoughts, the difference between my actions, and now what I'm thinking about the future and how it should happen, now all of a sudden I get this basis of what's wrong with me. So of course now it's the 4-step time. And I was feeling so good about myself and moving on to the 4th step. I had made my guilt and shame list, and I had made my resentment list, and then I got into a relationship. Damn, she was cute. Just this cute little Latin gal, and oh my God, she was great. And I had this job where I was, traveling all throughout California, teaching people how to do stuff. I'm a public speaker in one of my previous lives. And so I got all of this great stuff, and the 4th step collected dust for 2 years. And then guess what? I wasn't working on my recovery. I wasn't really working the process very often. I wasn't calling my sponsor. I was getting to a few meetings, and there I am with 4 years, and she leaves me. Actually, I broke up with her, and I was no great boyfriend. And then she started, for some god awful reason, my first ex-wife and I have been friends. I mean, we still talk today. We have 2 kids together, and she's known me for 25 years now. She's known me better than my family, my parents, my father, and my brother, and that's pretty much the extent of my family, and she knows me well. And I move around too much. No moss grows under me, so it's like, okay. But her and my girlfriend kind of became friends, and God. So after we break up, she started seeing my ex-brother-in-law. I lost my fucking mind. I mean, I remember sitting there going, if you pick up this phone and you go down this route, this is you at your worst. And I did, and I got fucking crazy for about 6 weeks. Lost my mind, thought I was going to blow my brains out. I mean, I stopped thinking about getting loaded, and I thought about, well, what's the quickest way to go out? how can I fucking make this over? And then I finally called my sponsor, went to some meetings, and I pulled out my 4-step. And I got fucking busy. And for the next 40, it was kind of ironic that it was right around Lent and all of this, but I spent 40 days on the front side writing what they did to me and how it affected me, on the back side of a piece of paper, what my part was and what were, my patterns. And, we're talking about, was it fear, greed, lust, pride, envy? Oh. I always like, I don't envy people. It's kind of like being petty. It's like, I hate petty people. Whatever. Yeah. I wrote down so much about envy, how much I envied people and how much that drove part of my life and how negative it had been. And what's interesting is the couple of sponsees that I've gotten through the 4-step, I let them find out for themselves as well. But they're like, dude, how did envy become so fucked up in my world? And it's like, yeah, it was and I show them mine. And, because my family, we keep it. And my 4-step's there for my sponsees. They're able to read it. My sponsor laid his 4-step out if I wanted to read it. There's that kind of trust. So there I was with all of this, I'm afraid, envy, lust, rage, rage and wrath, See, just so you know, anger is a feeling, and it's a perfectly valid feeling. I know that the other fellowship says, we're as junkies, we can't afford to be angry. And it's like, well, no, that was given to me. I was born with anger. Just look at any 3-year-old. And I say that kind of jokingly, but watch a 3-year-old. They are perfect. They don't know that their feelings are wrong. They have no idea that feelings are bad. When they're angry, they're angry. When they're happy, they're happy. When they're sad, oh my God, just some of the ways that they feel. And see, in all of this work, I started getting in touch with the fact that we'll get to resentment over my parents, but I was raised that my feelings weren't valid. That what I felt, Robert can probably, remember parents smoking in the car, windows rolled up, and, hanging out with my brother, and we were finally laughing and joking, and shut up! It's not that funny. Or what are you crying about? Knock it off. So me feeling sad was not okay. Me feeling happy wasn't okay. And, don't get me wrong. My parents are not the cause of my addiction. My addiction was my choices. The choices that I've made are mine. So I don't want anybody to be confused. We get to blame our parents for it. No, fuck that. So here I am in this 4-step, realizing that I've got this chain reaction of shit. And I'm sitting down with my, so the 4-step was really liberating. And after being on it for, over 2 years and then, taking the 2 months to, wow, I fucking did it. Well, my sponsor said, well, my sponsor changed the way I'm doing it and I'm not going to take you through until I'm done. So now I had to sit on it for 3 months. It was like, I was ready to change sponsors, like, fuck you, making me wait. And it's like, yeah, you can get over it. And I remember that commitment that I was going to finish the steps with him, no matter what. Funny thing is that in that time, after the 4-step, I won the cute Latin girl back. And it went swimmingly for like 2 months, and then 2 months of hell. And then, it was kind of an interesting spot. I had finished my 5th step with my sponsor. I had been doing really well and working for the state of California as a contractor, just finished a major project, a big pat on the back, like a real big ego boost and, some not false pride, like I'd done a good job. I'd done what I love to do. And so they were going to extend my contract. They were going to give me a raise, and it was supposed to go on for 18 months. And, so I got this new apartment and got my kids' rooms set up so they could be there on the weekends. And I would go from Sacramento and I'd be in Oakland during the week and I'd be in Sacramento on the weekends with my kids. And yeah. And then she left. My son got me robbed, my oldest son, from a relationship in Chicago. And the contract didn't come through. So now I've got like this double my rent and all of this stuff, and now I'm on unemployment. Everybody's on unemployment. It's 2009, the Great Recession, and I'm like, fuck. And then she leaves. So in my angst, I get into the 6th step. So all of those things that I identified around my part in my 4th step, and like I said, it's the 7 deadly sins. These times around, my 6th step looks a little different, but they always come back to fear. I'm afraid. So I work on that. What are the positives? What are the negatives? So, I can talk about, lust has positive and negatives. I'm a human mammal that, if I find somebody and they're attractive, it's a mating part. It's part of my humanity. But when I take it to the level of, hey, you got to do this and we got to do that, and I'm seeking it actively, then it's a defect. Pride. I've had moments where I'm really proud of what I've done. I worked hard. I finished something, and whether somebody congratulated me or patted me on the back really didn't matter. But I've had other times where I wanted to build myself up, and recently it was I wasn't doing a whole lot of work around my recovery. And you would always hear about how much I made, that I made good money. I've got a great wife, and, my life is really good. And I was trying to build myself up. So pride can be, that two-way street. Envy. Now move on. So here's envy. If I look and I see somebody who's worked hard and they've got some things that I like and they have that spiritual center that I'm looking for, I can go ask them how they did it, and I can go, hey, I like what you have. How do I get that? So that's how I pick sponsors now. But if I look at somebody and I go, shit, man, I should have that too. They're fucking lucky. And, I start making all these excuses on how great they, how easy they had it. Now I'm using envy in a negative way, because when I'm at peace with myself, there's always a cost for everything. I don't care if your parents are millionaires and they give you, a Lambo. There's a price to pay for being in that household. I can't assume that it's easy. So now we'll talk about step 7. And while all of these steps have pretty much equal weight, step 7 saved my life at 5 years clean. I was sitting in a men's meeting. I was still lamenting over, the second breakup with that gal. And I'm sitting there, and I said, I'm on step 6. Damn it, I'm fucking praying. I'm doing all of this stuff, and I'm really going through what I was doing in this men's meeting. And I asked for help, and I prayed about it, and I tried to force myself to change, and I keep asking for help, and nothing's getting better, and this is going on for a minute and a half. And I stop because my hand hurts. My palm of my hand actually hurts, kind of throbbing, and it's red. And I realized that's not how it's done. That's not what they're talking about. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. It means this is the human being that I am right now. I am making mistakes. I am not doing this right. And take them. And what taking them means is making me aware when I'm doing something that I stop that split second and go, I have a choice. This way has always fucked up my world. It has always turned into shit. And it always makes me feel miserable and all of this. So help me do anything but that. Anything. At that moment, I'm able to I have a choice. And I can tell you that I've taken that moment and done the thing that fucks up, the familiar misery. But there's more often than not where I took the chance and I said, okay, You know, like when the first ex-wife wants more money, you know, I can either fight her or I can say, here's where I'm at. What do you need? How can we find a solution? And now all of a sudden we're not arguing. Now I haven't, you know, called her out of her name. And so throughout that process, I was able to take situations that used to really make my life miserable and cause wreckage at 5-6 years clean. And now they weren't. So step 7 was really that turning point, and of going from this hot mess who thought he had all the answers to this guy who has very few answers, but has a solution to just about anything. There's the process for 1, 2, and 3. I can write about my resentments and look at my part. And I've got these defects that when I am acting out on them as shortcomings, I have an opportunity to think about it differently. So we get into step 8. And I sat on it for a while because I had made my list in the first week. I mean, God, myself, my parents, and then all the list of the people from the 4th step, and I wasn't feeling it. There was like no real desire. There was something missing. And I sat on it, and I was having problems with my kids. They were kind of getting at that age, and we found out, I mean, we didn't know then, but it looks, you know, at the time he was 10, and my son was on the autism spectrum. And I had no idea how to deal with that. And I just had the way to deal with it was the way my parents dealt with me. And I got angry. And I got frustrated. And, you know, put a pretty big divide between me and my son. And I was talking to one of the people who had become very much a spiritual person that I really talked to, wasn't my sponsor. And she had kind of gone into Old Testament stuff and then reminded me how far I could go. And then I kind of realized that while I was on the list, I didn't mean it. I just didn't mean it. And so I put my name on there. And I can tell you that through all of the stuff that I was going through, fucking cried again. Just fucking let it out that I needed to forgive myself. I needed to make amends to myself. And then I was willing. And, you know, one of the things I'm finding as I'm going through with my sponsees that the 9th step, I didn't give it as much heed as I needed to. I made some big amends, some financial, some personal, and, you know, mostly to my parents, one to the IRS to the tune of $20,000. But, you know, when they came up, my sponsor said, put them in your back pocket, and when they're ready, you'll know. And so there were situations that came up, and I was able to tell them, okay, here's my part. Here's what I've done, and what can I do to make it right? And some of the times it was very easily right out there. You know, this is what you need to do. Other times we had to talk it out. So fast forward, I lost a great apartment. I ended up sleeping in, taking a guest bedroom from a friend of mine. Really humbling situation. And here I am, I'm doing better in my recovery than I've ever had. And, you know, I got my car, my shit's in storage, and I'm sleeping in this sleeping room, and I can't find a job. And a company that didn't like me, because, you know, I was young and stupid, this guy took a chance on me and said, well, we need somebody, and Scott vouches for you, so can you be in Denver next week? Well, shit, my stuff's already in storage. I'm already, you know, knee-deep in debt, so sure. And it was one of those situations where I got, it was weird. I lived in Sacramento, and we had to go over the Sierras and go into the mountains, and they were having a really big rain, so that means a lot of snow over the pass. And I loaded up the car with everything I needed. I ended up in between 2 storms that were 6 hours apart, got over the pass, and as I'm pulling onto the freeway, I knew what I was doing was changing my life. I had no idea, no fucking clue what was going to happen. And I just trusted my higher power that this change was for the best. And what it allowed me to do was finish up some of my 9th step, really get into some self-care around step 10 and looking at when I had done harm and actually getting to that point. Step 10 is also taking on a greater part of my life right now. But, you know, so in that reading, it didn't say freedom from active addiction. It said the promise of freedom. And there was about 7 months into that contract where I looked around and I said, I am free. My stuff doesn't own me. I can be anywhere in the country in 3 days. I can be packed up in 2 hours. And there was a freedom knowing that I had come far enough that I could go anywhere. I could stay clean. I could find meetings, and I could do what I like to do. As far as work, I was building a career. I started building more. A year later, actually, no, I was still in Denver. I started finding self-care in the gym and yoga, and that really worked in my meditation. You know, that I'm still a fucked up an American where meditation, you know, oh, just sit for, 30 minutes. And it's like, I got shit to do. So I started doing yoga and some exercising, and it was like, oh, wow, this works. I'm able to find something at the end of this. And so that was my experience. Now, my sponsor, he had studied transcendental meditation. So, I mean, he could shut off all the lights and sit on his floor and be gone for an hour and a half. Not my truth. So before I went to Kentucky, I flew back to Sacramento for some things with my kids and my ex-wife. And I made an appointment with my sponsor. And again, an emotional part is because at this point, what is it? It's 2010. My first experience started in 1983, and I'm sitting with this man, and we're reading through the 12th step, and we knew I was done. I had finished the steps. It only took me, 28 years, 27 years to get through the steps. And for any of you who are balking on the steps, I'm not going to tell you to do it. I mean, you're in a 12-step program. You're either going to do it or you're not. In fact, do whatever the fuck you want. I'm not here to bring on guilt or shame or anything around how you do or don't do your recovery, whether you're screwing the newcomers or not. I have a firm belief that you're going to do it anyway. And if we just contribute to your guilt and shame, it's going to probably get worse. But I will tell you, in my experience, everything has a consequence. And if I'm not willing to pick up the check, I better check my shit. And I can tell you, I think we're coming closer to time, but so I finished that. I go to Denver. I move to Kentucky. I make these pros and cons lists. I got an opportunity to go back to Sacramento to be around my kids. And 3 months into it, I get laid off. So I've been working, I've been taking care of my shit. I'm back in Sacramento, I'm gonna be around my kids. And all of a sudden that self-deflation, who I was no longer existed. And I had to realize that I'm not my job. I love what I do. Do you need to get that? Okay. So I ended up getting hired on about 3 months later. I had to work through those issues, and the man who took me through the steps had done so much service and so much stuff. He hit his 13 years, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm not going to meetings." So I find a sponsor there, start working, and I'm doing this training gig, and I'm down in San Diego, and I get a call from the guy who hired me in Denver and says, "Hey, we're doing this big thing in Washington. and it's not the role that you usually play. But somewhere along the line, it took me 4 years to get an associate's degree that I never petitioned to graduate for because I was loaded. So technically I didn't graduate anything and I have no degrees. But somewhere along the line, I was able to parlay all of that into this thing called a project management professional certificate. And I'm really fucking good at it. Imagine that, planning and controlling shit. Not anything any of us are good at. And they say, hey, we need you to come rewrite this project plan, and we'll bring you on as a full-time employee. So, I mean, I've been spending my entire 9 years clean, picking up contract gigs and, always having to hunt for work, and they're going to offer me a permanent consulting gig. And I can tell you that my higher power brings people into my life, and so I'm getting ready to fly from San Diego to Sacramento, and one of the gals who had just seen me train, her husband owned a consulting company that wrote the proposal for the project that I was going to be on. And forget whatever your politics are. I came up here to essentially, in my profession, put a man on the moon. We built the health plan finder for Washington State. And like I said, wherever your politics are or whatever you think of it, it was one of those opportunities to do something big. And I moved up here. And okay, we gotta go on to it. So one of the things I found in this is that I needed to start the steps. I needed to get a new sponsor, and I was here for about 6 months. And the fact that I'd been on the road for so long kicked in, and just that loneliness. I mean, I was going to meetings, I was sharing the message, I was bringing what I had. I was having problems with my ex-wife who was using again, and my kids kind of blamed me. And so here I am doing as well as I fucking can be, meeting all of my responsibilities, and my kids don't really want to see me. The ex-wife is giving me shit. I'm, new in this area. I really don't know anybody, and I'm working 70 hours a week, and she came into my life, and I fell head over heels. I mean, she hit all of the right buttons that I was just, yeah. So here I was getting all of this attention from this gal, and 8 months later I proposed to her. A year later we're married, and there was this problem that kept reoccurring, and I didn't understand it, and I was getting frustrated, and I was getting angry, and I wasn't really, so kind of piece this together. I was on another 4-step with my sponsor, and we were kind of going through it, and I always date my stuff from where I'm at. And it was right before I got married, and I realized that after I got married, I didn't do any fucking step work. And we were having this reoccurring problem. And I tell you this just so you know that it can happen, and that with 11 years, 11 months, and 6 days, that I haven't done this perfectly. This reoccurring fight that happened about every 3 months happened, and on September 4th, I was yelling. I put my hands on her, telling her she needed to get out of the house. And I spent Labor Day weekend in jail. Now, other facts came into play that the story that was told didn't match the truth, but I knew the next day that I needed to get help because this had shown up in my life. This was a character defect. My rage had shown up again. And I mean, the entire relationship, I didn't call her out of her name. I never berated or belittled her. Most of my things was, you've got this bipolar. What are you doing? There's this therapy. There's things good are going on. How can I help? what happened is my codependency kicked in. So, and my anger and my, all of the things that I went through and talked about my steps, it faltered. And I realized how complacent I had gotten. So I'm going through a divorce right now with somebody who's in the rooms. I'm not allowed to go to about half the meetings. I've been at a meeting and she has come in and made me leave because there is a no contact order. I'm dealing with the consequences of my actions. So, like I said, you can do whatever you want around here, but you got to pick up the check. We are accountable. I am accountable for my actions today. So I'm not here to blow happy smoke up your ass that it wasn't true and all of that. I know I crossed the line. Not the line that was said, but I crossed the line. So legal fees, classes, I'm fucking dumping any money that I've been saving and taking care of. And I can tell you that right now I deal with a lot of fear. I've got some huge resentments against our fellowship down in Olympia. And some of my crazy is shown. Haven't dealt with it, but every once in a while people come up and do things like, we're sorry you're going through this alone. I'm sorry that the fellowship is treating you this way. We're sorry. It's been a small group. But I've got a few people who I know I can trust. There's Robert and Kyle and a couple of men and my sponsor. And there's some people that I've just outright cut out of my life. It's like, and I can tell you, you guys don't care, but one of the parts of the reoccurring problem was that she was loaded most of the time, and I didn't see it. Because I thought I was doing the right thing by putting trust out there. And when you love somebody and you make that commitment, trust is key. So throughout all of my relationships and all of my step work, I learned a lot. And I don't know if there's anybody else here with, more than 10 years, but if you get there or you're there, I now believe the people that were telling me that if you are in your second decade and you haven't worked on your codependent issues, they'll work you. So that's where I'm at. I mean, I'm getting outside help. I'm going to classes. I'm doing what people are telling me, and not always willing. I'm still an addict. I go kicking and screaming, and I think I'm entitled to something better. But the fact of the matter is that I got off lucky a lot of times, so I'm paying the piper now. And thank God. Thank God that I have this opportunity to fucking learn. So I can tell you that my self-care today is, I'm taking care of myself physically. I turned 50 next July, and I signed up for a triathlon. Now, don't get too impressed. It's, the small one, but I mean, I'm going to have to swim a half mile, bike, and then run a 5K. And it's something that I've always wanted to do. And so through all of these things, I get an opportunity to do that. And getting out of this relationship and moving on, I get an opportunity to find who I am. And that's something that was promised in the freedom. So I take the freedom that Narcotics Anonymous gives me to heart. It means more to me than the whole freedom from active addiction. And, we get the promise of freedom. So whatever that looks like for you, you have an opportunity. The good news is that you can find it. Your spiritual experience as a result of these steps is yours. I can't tell you what it's going to be like. So if you think the steps are bullshit, fine. But you might be able to find something out of it, and you will never know. I didn't know until I actually did it. And the fact that I did it meant a lot to me. And I hope you get a chance to do it too. Thanks, and I'm done.